Kids was down there for a month on like a, I'm not gonna say a vacation, but their house was being worked on, so they went down there for a month to live. And he worked outside the or outside of a home, inside of a home office. The rest of the family had fun. We went down there and visited them. That was lots of fun. Then in mid-October, we thought it's time to do something else. So we went on a trip to the wild, wild west, Colorado. I said this before, I'm going to say it again. I cannot stress this enough. Vacations are not a luxury. Vacations are a necessity. They're necessary to clear the mind, rest the body, rejuvenate the soul. Or is it rejuvenate the mind, rest the soul, and clear the body? I don't know. Maybe all of the above. But you've got to stop, take a breath, step away for a good week. That's a true vacation. If it's not a week long, it's not a vacation. And you don't have to go away to go on vacation. At least you don't have to go away far. You do have to step away from the norms of life. Maybe it's just on a quick camping trip. Maybe it's across the country to visit with a relative. Maybe it's going to Europe. Okay. Doesn't have to be expensive. It can be, but it doesn't have to be expensive. Vacations are something that need to be budgeted because vacations are something that have to be taken. Now, Southwest Airlines has been advertising forever, $59 fares. Okay. Yeah. Okay. From between Albuquerque and Omaha. Okay. Places I don't want to fly. The places I want to fly or the places I need to fly weren't much cheaper than they ever were. Okay. That's just what I found. Until I looked at St. Louis to Denver. Bang. There it was. $59 one way. Quick do the math. What is that? $120 round trip? Folks, that's dirt cheap. So we did it. We booked the flight. And actually, I booked my flight. I got hers with points. But dirt cheap airfare to Denver. Okay, Denver's on the front range of the Rocky Mountains. So now it was time to go, time to drive. One of the goals of the trophy wife, and I'm trying my best to help her achieve these goals, is she wants to see every national park in the country. She's about halfway there. And we saw 4 more on this last vacation. Rocky Mountain National Park, Black Canyon of the Gunnison, Sand Dunes National Park, and Mesa Verde National Park. So 4 more national parks we were able to see. And they're all in different parts of the state. The Northeast, the West, the Southwest, and the East. Different parts of the state. But we got into Denver. We got an old dark 30 flight. Landed in Denver, actually, at 7:20 a.m. So if we're going to get a lot done in the first day, that's how you do it. You land at the airport at 7:20. The car we rented, a Chevy Malibu, very comfortable, very nice. Got almost 38 miles to the gallon with that car, and that's going through the mountains. So plenty of power, plenty of room, good gas mileage. I liked the Chevy Malibu. It was a good car. Like I said, we landed at 7:20, gathered our luggage, got the car, and headed up to Estes Park, Colorado, which is where Rocky Mountain National Park is. Estes Park is a beautiful little town, nestled in the mountains, had breakfast there, and then we went to Rocky Mountain National Park, which, because it's so close to Denver, it's a very crowded park. It's very busy. There's a lot of folks there. But this was the middle of the week, in the middle of October. So it wasn't that crowded. Not many families, not many kids, a lot of young people, a lot of old people, maybe people on vacation without obligations, and kids were in school, so not many kids. But even though the weather in Denver was fine, it was sunny and, I guess partly cloudy, mostly overcast, partly cloudy, and maybe 60 degrees. As you climb up into the mountains, things change in a hurry. Lots of ice, lots of snow. Yeah, lots of ice and lots of snow. And it was strange because, 2 hours earlier, you're not even wearing a jacket. Then you're wearing a winter coat with the hood on. It was kind of strange. But the aspens were in full bloom, or full bloom, full autumn foliage, I guess I'll say. They're a golden color, the leaves are. But they were just beautiful. You get up to altitude, you see them. And the Rocky Mountain National Park was wonderful. Lots of wildlife, lots of deer, mule deer, which are different than we have here. Around here we have the whitetails, which they're a beautiful animal. But the mule deer, they're bigger. They're gray instead of brown. The males have larger racks. They're just a bigger animal. And there were also a lot of elk up there in the mountains. And elk, to me, look like a massive a massive mule deer. They're just that much bigger. But lots of wildlife, lots of snow, lots of ice, lots of just preserved nature. So we stopped. We walked around a couple of lakes. We got so far, and then the altitude was so high that people were having to start to wear crampons while they were taking their hikes. Well, we didn't have crampons on, so we had to go back to the car. Got back in the car, drove down, spent the evening in a suburb of Denver. Ate dinner at a real nice Indian restaurant, beautiful restaurant, fantastic food. With the intention of getting up in the morning and going to Pikes Peak, which is just south of Denver. But there was a lot of snow, and Pikes Peak was closed. So that was one thing we had to scratch off the list. So since we weren't going to Pikes Peak, we could take our time and drive to the town of Montrose. Montrose, Colorado is in the western part of the state. But there was one problem. The main way to Montrose is via US 50. And US 50 was closed due to construction. Now what do we do? Well, the GPS said, you know what, you got to go this way and that way and that way. It was going to take us 8.5 hours to get there. I'm thinking to myself, I don't think this is right. So we went onto the website. They had a highway website about US 50. And late that afternoon, it was a Friday afternoon, they opened it up. So 50 was closed due to construction. But during the weekends, they get the trucks out of the way, get the road ready, and let people use it. So we're able to use it for the weekend. So we really lucked out. Knocked about 3 hours off of our trip. So we're able to take US 50 through Gunnison, Colorado, and through those areas. A lot of nice, beautiful little towns, quaint little towns. Towns that I think probably rely a whole lot on tourism and retirees living in the towns. But nice leisurely drive there. Again, aspens were all aglow, simply beautiful. And Montrose was our home base for our national park trip to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Now, Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, the name itself sounds kind of strange. Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Well, what is the Gunnison? Well, the Gunnison is a river, the Gunnison River. And the canyon is not unlike the Grand Canyon, except for it's not nearly as big. And it's certainly not nearly as wide. In fact, it's very narrow, very, very narrow. In fact, that's why they call it the Black Canyon, because some walls of the canyon get little or no sun. It's so deep and it's so narrow. Hence the term Black Canyon of the Gunnison. It's a canyon. It's black because no sun. The Gunnison River is at the bottom, dragging it along and making the canyon. But we went on a couple hikes up there too. Just beautiful topography. The hikes were wonderful. Ran into some problems on the hikes because when we started off in the morning, everything was cold and frozen. Then the sun came out and it started to melt and thaw the frozen dirt. Well, when frozen dirt melts, it turns into mud. So we started slipping and sliding and thought we're going to break our necks. So we cut the last hike a little short, cheated, jumped on the road and walked to the car. And then we were off. The other thing about that park that made things interesting is because it's wintertime and most of the bathrooms were closed and most of the visitor centers were closed as well. Visitor centers were closed due to COVID-19. They didn't want people in there. But the bathrooms were closed because it was cold and they couldn't run water. So there were outhouses, some, but not many. So sometimes it was kind of a challenge trying to find a bathroom in time. But thank goodness we had no troubles really, and We didn't embarrass ourselves. Let's just say that. After that, we drove to the town of Alamosa. Alamosa is in eastern Colorado. Got there that evening. And again, just a beautiful drive through, let's see, how can I even, it was almost like we're going through Switzerland. Anybody who's ever been through Colorado, if you're going down the major interstates, like Interstate 70 or US 50, the major highways, you can see these massive farms and ranches in all of the meadows, the valleys, okay? But you never really get that close to them. We took a little out-of-the-way trip to the town of Alamosa, and we're able to drive through some of these ranches on these little 2-lane blacktop roads, and they were absolutely beautiful. The clear brooks, the beautiful prairies and meadows, the cattle and horses were right there. It was like something out of The Sound of Music. I'm so glad we took that route, but it was simply unbelievably beautiful. Got through all that to the town of Alamosa, little farming community in the San Juan Valley, and had dinner at a Mexican restaurant. You think to yourself, oh boy, dinner at a Mexican restaurant. How exciting is that? Well, this wasn't Taco Bell, okay? And this wasn't Los fill in the blanks like we have it out here, okay? In that part of the country, there's a large Hispanic population, and they know how to cook Mexican food. In fact, I had a dish called pozole. If any of you have ever had pozole, you know what I'm talking about. It's Mexican stew, okay? It's big hunks of pork, hominy, vegetables, and they give you some cilantro, some onions, some cabbage that you throw on top of it as a garnish, and it's simply wonderful. You think to yourself, that's all you had for your main meal of the day is a bowl of soup? No, this wasn't a bowl of soup. This was a massive platter of meaty stew. So if you ever get an opportunity, if you're ever at a Mexican restaurant, if they ever feature a dish called pozole, do yourself a favor, check it out. It's unbelievably wonderful. Well, outside of the town of Alamosa was the Sand Dunes National Park. And of the 4 parks, I mean, it was fine, but it had a bunch of sand dunes there, okay? And that was about it. I mean, it was very interesting, but it was nothing I hadn't seen in Death Valley. It's kind of a phenomenon. There's a name for it, but the name escapes me. But basically, if you get wind that comes in, the sand kind of settles in the little next to the mountains. It can't get over the mountains, so it just sits right there. And that's what this park was. They had these huge sand dunes, and they were quite beautiful. They're quite interesting, and the history behind it was good too. They featured a photograph that was taken 150 years earlier and compared it to a photograph today. The peaks of the dunes were in the exact same spot, about the exact same height as they were 150 years ago. And that's despite people climbing all over these things. You think to yourself, well, how can that be? It's because the wind truly shapes them. Not just shapes them and builds them, but it controls their height. It controls the valleys. It really sculpts those mountains of sand and keeps them different, or keeps them the same rather, even though people change them. Nature keeps them the same. After we're done with Sand Dunes National Park, we drove to Cortez, Colorado. Now, what's in Cortez, Colorado, you may ask? Well, 2 things. Mesa Verde National Park, which is home to the cliff dwellers, the Pueblo people of old. They would build their homes, their pueblos in the nooks and crannies of the cliffs. But also, in Cortez, Colorado, lives the Maddog. That's right. He lives in Cortez, Colorado nowadays. Yeah, he's still in St. Louis half the time, in Colorado half the time. But he bought a beautiful home in Cortez, Colorado, because it was always his dream to move there. Ever since he was a boy in the Boy Scouts and spent time at Philmont in New Mexico.